Now, coming back to electrifying everything, the planes and the boats, what's your view on home batteries? Have you thought about that? That can change the world in a very big way. Australia threw in multi-billion-dollar subsidy for home batteries. So views on that?
Yeah, I have to do a little bit of an about face on home batteries because a few years ago, I was a bit of a skeptic saying, hey, this will make sense in certain applications in the Californian market where there are demand charges, time of use rates. It can make sense for people to load shift. But at that time, batteries were expensive enough and production was constrained enough that I had a hard time seeing home batteries as being the application where we would both see and need as much deployment as we have currently seen. And so I've reversed my stance on that, where even though I used to be not very optimistic about home batteries, the performance of batteries on the grid, both in homes and grid scale battery deployments, has absolutely blown me away. The quantities of deployment we've seen in places like Australia, where the solar production is just off the charts, and what China is doing, the graph of Chinese solar installation is just mind-boggling. And the way that batteries have really risen to the challenge, and battery producers have just absolutely opened the taps for how many batteries we're going to get on grid. It's been incredible to see. So I've got solar on my house, and I didn't get a battery installed a few years ago when I put it on, but now I'm looking at going back and saying, hey, this could make sense. Cincinnati isn't the sunniest place necessarily, but seeing the uptake for batteries on the grid and locations with a lot of solar generation is really encouraging.
Because batteries, I have a battery in my house in Melbourne, gives you a different level of comfort that, yes, I have a day's worth of supply sitting there. Yes, we need to tap into. And then, of course, you sell the back into the grid and you get a tiny amount, but you
Sure.
import back at a very high price. If you don't do that, then you're suddenly saying, wow.
Mhm.
Notion of free electricity, although it's not free, but zero marginal cost. This is huge psychic value
Yeah,
on top
definitely.
of
You
the
know,
physical value. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of keeping your own lights on in case of some kind of disaster is just this immense benefit and comfort. I've got a EV that will do vehicle to load, and just knowing that I have a great big battery in my garage, in my car, that if I needed to, I could plug in my essential loads to that. It gives a great sense of comfort that isn't there as a side benefit when you choose an EV versus a fossil vehicle, knowing, hey, if lights do go out, I've got a couple of days worth of power in my car.
I interviewed someone the other day, and he was saying that he has this induction cooktop that he used to camping, and it can draw up to 3 kilowatt or whatever the induction cooktop needs from the battery. It's a tiny battery, but it can 3C release or something and works perfectly
That's
fine.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got the same thing. I need to go digging around for it a bit, but I also have a cooktop, and just with the basic vehicle to load outlet that's available on my Kia with an adapter, I could run some extension cords around and keep our Wi-Fi on and run the microwave, run the induction cooktop. And that just coming as a side benefit, a little extra bonus of having an EV, because it's such a common feature these days, is just a really neat option.
Yeah, but what do you tell? You have been a user for more than 10 years, EV. Of course, you are bold at that time. There's so many misconceptions out there and so many myths, this and that. Still, they're out there. So, what you tell those people, what have you learned, of course, in the 10 years?
Sure. Yeah. Mostly I tell people, hey, come on in. The water's fine. I found my way into EVs just from pure undiluted enthusiasm and interest and the technology of electric power. I was interested in radio controlled vehicles when I was young, and that's how I developed my fascination with electricity as just this invisible, almost magical force that would propel this RC car or an airplane or now drones everywhere. And just the amount of power that was available, even in that time, from a motor and a battery together was just fascinating to me. And so I found my way into EVs just out of interest in the technology. But along the way, I developed a understanding what's happening with our environment and a deal of concern about how air quality is impacted by fossil fuels. And not everyone's going to have the same motivations when considering what benefits of electrification are most meaningful to them. But I have found a lot of traction with just the idea that this is just a lifestyle enhancement. It's just an upgrade to not have to worry about all of the different demands that operating a fossil fuel vehicle makes of you to worry about all the maintenance that's required when you've got components that are reaching hundreds of degrees and being coated in hydrocarbons and keeping that in your garage. If you think about how wild it is that it might be normal to store tank of carcinogenic, potentially explosive fuel in your home where you sleep. If someone was pitching that as the new technology, no one would accept it. And so whether it's that or domestic energy security, or local production of energy, local air quality, the benefits and running costs, there are just so many different benefits of electrification. And in talking with many people over the years, I can happily say there's been a number of people that I've convinced to go EV because there's been some benefit or another that applies in their situation.
Yeah, exactly as you said. I think there is video floating around on the internet, which is basically saying that ICE cars are baseline. We are trying to introduce, had it been the other way around, that electric cars are baseline, you charge at home and you're just trying to sell someone saying, oh, by the
Yeah.
way, to go somewhere else to get this. It's hilarious when you think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. If the baseline was electric, how you try to sell an internal combustion engine car?
Yeah. And it's a paradigm shift. There are things that we've been raised to accept as just the normal part of doing business with needing to drive somewhere. And that means you're storing dangerous flammable hydrocarbons in your home if you're parking in a garage or dealing with dispensing them. And that inconvenience or that risk doesn't seem to cost very much in most people's minds. And there are some trade-offs, of course, that come with going electric. People always worry about the family road trip, the once a year drive or the couple of times a year drive going somewhere. And having driven all across the country in electric vehicles from Utah to Ohio and down to Florida and back in EVs, of course, it's a little bit different. It's a paradigm shift. Everything from going from fossil fuels to electric is a paradigm shift. But when you spend enough time in the electric paradigm, you realize that these trade-offs are definitely a net benefit for almost every situation. There's some outlier use cases where the refueling time, if you want to put it that way, has an outsized impact. But by and large, almost every use case has just so much to benefit from electrification.
It's the other way around as well, because people worry saying, okay, if we go long distances, the charger won't be here. But I remember driving from Darwin to Kakadu National Park, basically there's nothing in between. It's about 400 kilometers or something. You top it up. But if you
Yeah.
go for EV, it's very easy to set up a solar charger every 50 kilometers if you want to, because no one needs to be there. If you put a
Sure.
gasoline station, someone has to come and fill it up, right? That's why it's none there, because economics doesn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with limited resources where things are not populated or very rural areas, one road trip I did one time back in the early days was through the desert of Utah. And it still is a highway in the American West. There are services there, but it's pretty remote, pretty sparse. But at this time, my EV was a Volkswagen e-Golf that had only a 24 kilowatt hour battery. And you'd be very lucky to get 80 miles of range on it. And so it was a little bit of a bold choice to say, hey, I'm going out into the desert. I've checked the map and it's technically possible. I think I'm going to do this. But it's also a different feeling to just be leaving that last kind of exit of the city behind you and say, here we go, out into the desert. And it was fun. There was no problem. There were enough charging stations that I was even driving past some and making my way there. And hey, it was an adventure and I made it without any issues.
Yeah, good. So what's your view then on autonomous vehicle now that you have done so much electric vehicle driving for 10 years? Once you get used to it, once you start relying more and more on the technology, because electric car is completely technology driven so much.
Yeah, with autonomy, I really think hard about the data. And I think we can look at the data now and show us that the autonomous vehicle fleet is safer per mile driven than a human driver is. And human drivers get distracted as a terrible problem or fatigued or just simply aren't very attentive. And the benefit of autonomy is that those trade-offs aren't there. So again, there's a paradigm shift. And it's difficult sometimes for people to accept the shift where the drawbacks with autonomy are different kinds of risk, where it's a good performance, a great performance even from autonomy for improving the safety of people driving on the road. But the fact that there are still accidents that happen sometimes or situations that can't be foreseen and that loss of life has happened with essentially a robot at the wheel with autonomous, it's difficult to feel like your fate is being put into the hands of this force that you don't control with ADAS systems. And it might not be very reassuring to know that those stats are working in your favor when you're handing things over to a Waymo or just Tesla Autopilot. But I feel like the benefits of it are fantastic. When I got a vehicle with even just some really basic autonomy, I felt like making long drives was so much less fatiguing. The fact that my role in the driver's seat now is monitoring and supervising a machine that is doing its job and not making every continual micro adjustment to the steering wheel that's necessary. Even just that is a huge benefit. I think very often of the Pareto principle where 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. And I feel like that definitely applies to vehicle autonomy where that first little 20% of getting the basics in place. It's keep me in my lane. It's going to maintain distance from the vehicle ahead of me. Phew, that's already 80% of the way there. And this is a classic case of getting that last 1% to make autonomy really work so well. You can take the steering wheel off the car. That's incredibly difficult work. But I feel like we've already gained just a huge amount of benefit from that first easy base mark of just letting the vehicle do the dirtiest chores there, just keeping me in the lane.
Yeah, other thing, as you exactly said, these autonomous vehicles, they nicely equidistant from the lines. So they said
Yeah.
human driver either will be leaning on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. So
Yeah.
effectively, the gap between the cars on two lanes varies from time to time. And then the bit that's sort of I find very interesting, whether we trust or not, or how long it takes us to trust autonomous car, but it would be the most experienced driver. You get into your average Uber, you don't know how long that person is driving.
Yeah.
Maybe just got a driver's license, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows? Could they have been driving for 14 hours already? And if
Yes.
someone's really trying to make ride sharing work for them, the human system is not always the preferential option here. The robot doesn't get tired. Automation doesn't need breaks. And it's really a benefit that it can be reliable in that way, both for commercial drivers and the Uber from the airport.
What are your worries about slowly AI encroaching us from all around you? Being an engineer and being in this field, you must be very excited, but there must be some in the back of
Yeah.
your head also saying, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah, there are benefits and risks and trade-offs with every new technology and with every paradigm shift. And there's so much we could talk about the broader implications of automation on our world and the way that AI is going to change just human effort and human labor in the future. And right, as an engineer, I see the way that this is, I don't want to say creeping into our world because that makes it sound only negative. There are certainly many risks and many negative trade-offs and externalities that happen with automation when you look at it holistically. But the benefits that come with a tool like AI are also incredible. And automation has taken away so many of just the worst jobs in the world. People doing incredibly repetitive tasks in factories, and Midwestern America, where I live, is dramatically reduced. So automation in its earliest days took away a lot of the worst jobs that we had. And we really do have to reckon with what happens when those jobs are taken away. But there's also a way that you can say, hey, people are not having to do these pretty miserable manufacturing jobs anymore. Or I don't think anyone really liked working in a call center. And the fact that now that's being handled by automation, by and large, a benefit, and that kind of miserable work doesn't need to be done anymore. But the trade-offs, when you're on the other end of the phone and the AI agent simply does not understand what you're looking for, or when you worked in a town with a call center that got shut down, those benefits are not being distributed evenly, and the risks and the externalities are being doled out without much consideration for who is shouldering those negative impacts. And I think our culture needs to have a conversation about how we're going to use these powerful tools that we have developed.
Yeah, because you see, when first Google came in, information became free, right? So suddenly everyone has access to everything. And now we are heading towards a world where electricity is free if you already have a solar, the incremental, there's zero cost. And then if you're driving an electric car using that solar, so your kilometer is free, then you have access to an AI, which everyone almost has now. So that means your knowledge is free. So you put all of those things that people use, and then if your energy is free, you can grow food for free. theoretically very easy, right? So all these essential things that we have been fighting for or developing technologies for, if you can travel for free, eat for free, and cool and heating for free, and knowledge for free, it's a very interesting paradigm shift. So
Yeah.
many dimensions, no?
Yeah. And I want to show some optimism in humanity that
No,
we'll
no, I'm
figure
very
out.
optimistic about
Yeah.
this, but I'm saying it's so much opportunity. What do you do with it,
It
right?
is. Yeah. Yeah. I think that as we work on how we cooperate together, because
Mhm.
I think so much of human history, you look back and there's this balance between cooperation and competition. And that's the story of life where all the cooperation that has been necessary and that we have achieved in order to make these technologies possible between basic research scientists working in a lab and Bell Laboratories and developing the photovoltaic device, and that coming together with we're stringing wires across our continent in order to distribute energy. But this also happening in a context of economic competition, and that competition driving investment and innovation. But as we get to a point now where the cooperation that's required in order to make these systems work on a broad and global scale, it just becomes more and more difficult, more and more complex to make this all work, not just with the technological systems, but the social systems of how these benefits are going to be distributed, because we have developed a system where that competition has pushed up control of how all these systems work to a vanishingly few. And that's one of the biggest social challenges that we have today. Being able to have free transportation, free distribution of information is utterly fantastic. What a benefit for humanity. And it's just an incredible situation to be in that, hey, we found out that fossil fuels, what pushed us into this position of global rising out of poverty and everything, are also poisoning our planet. The fact that it's even possible for us to have these technologies make the shift, I think is incredible, but it's going to require an immense amount of cooperation in order to see this work out and develop a stable world on the other side of this transition.
Yes, and absolutely. Because I listened to one of the podcasts the other day, and one of the discussion was that people who want to compete, they will use the tools, and some people will not be able to compete. They need to be covered with a universal income of some kind. But whatever shape or take we take, but I think the fossil fuel grip on the society is slowly going, because people at all levels have seen the light. Electric
Yeah.
cars had a lot of resistance, solar had, batteries still have. But I think people, with people like yourself saying, hey, I've been driving for 14 years or 10 years, where is the problem? And then people start seeing meaning, because these things are way cheaper, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Solar is
Yeah.
cheaper than anything else, and it's free in many cases. Everyone has a roof, right?
Yeah, I think that the economic case for electrification and for the shift to clean energy just makes total sense. The tech that you can put out in a solar panel and collect energy and use it for just about anything that you used to need to pay a fuel supplier for, in the general sense, that's incredibly compelling. You have your own asset on your roof or wherever, and you can use it for just about anything. It's incredibly compelling. The challenge that I see with that paradigm shift is who's holding the assets. There's a great new book coming out that I heard an author describing the way that the asset holders of the past system, the folks that are sitting on the oil under the ground or the gas, and the resistance to the shift in energy and distribution is coming largely in part from who holds the old assets, the oil and gas and the production and distribution systems for them, versus who holds the green assets in the future. And how we're going to distribute this, the benefits of the system, and how the asset holders of the existing and past system are going to resist that because of the way that our economic model is set up for sad to say, but in many cases, winner take all outcome. It's a challenge, a social challenge for sure for us to figure out. And I'm hoping that we can find our way to compete and collaborate in the right ways in order to push out a cleaner and more just world for everyone.
Yeah, hope we can only hope.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I've told to many people before, just within the niche of electric vehicles, come on in. The water's fine. As a early adopter, making my road trips and getting the solar panels and everything, I can happily report that, hey, this system really does work.
Yes, and then thanks to internet, like if once, as soon as people take an interest, they can look up anything and everything. So much information out there. Just have to take that interest, saying, okay, I heard it's
Mhm.
easy.
Yeah, that first step is often the hardest. That the journey must begin with a single step, as it has been said. And the curiosity got me into it, the curiosity about the technology and what it will take for people to let that interest shift into action. It will be different for everyone. But now that it's become so common and so easy for people to see their friends, uncles, coworkers benefiting from one aspect or another of the energy transition, I feel like, yeah, it will be easy for a lot of people to get on the bandwagon if the systems are there for them to do.
Hope so.